Hello, everybody. Welcome today. So today we have the great pleasure to have Eric Zeitlo, the head of developer relations at the Akash network, to talk about decentralized compute markets that Akash is creating. And I have with me Ishgun and Fernanda, both leaders of the CMU blockchain group and CMU students who are also here to really dig into the details of, how does it work? How do you buy and procure compute on the network? How is it better than AWS? How is it cheaper? How is it faster? Um, we'll figure that out in this talk. So I'd like to start things off and ask Eric, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? How'd you get into crypto and how'd you end up at Akash?
Yeah, so it's actually, I took a very abnormal route from a lot of the people. Pretty much everyone else at my company started in crypto and then kind of got into hosting. I actually was in the world of distributed compute, distributed databases, complex compute. So Kubernetes back before it was really like the thing it is today. I was there in that world. And coming from that, Akash actually reached out to me. Basically, they were looking for someone with my particular skill set in the cloud, and basically offered to educate me on the crypto side of things. I was a very passive. I had some ETH, right? I had a wallet, but when it came to like utility coins or any of the kind of more advanced chains or ecosystems, really had no knowledge. So they basically came in, gave me an education, and then I was able to take my knowledge on the hosting components, and yeah, here today.
Sweet. Thank you for the introduction, Eric. I think before we jump right into what a Akash network is, it might be useful for us to talk a little about data centers versus cloud and regular cloud versus decentralized cloud, your understanding of it, what you think we should know to figure out the inefficiencies in everything, and how Akash is building upon them.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the kind of fundamental concepts or premises to our entire business model is that a lot of the compute in data centers goes unused. Just whether it's idling most of the time, whether it's maybe old compute that isn't currently running a workload, whatever it is, there's just tremendous number of compute or a tremendous amount of compute resources out there that just aren't being utilized. So wouldn't it be cool if you could take those, put them somewhere, and just kind of like Airbnb is for, say, a spare room, you can take that compute and you can then rent it out to someone who wants it, right? So all Akash Network really is the ability to create those relationships between providers and consumers in a decentralized, secure way, of course, using blockchain.
Great, interesting. And I guess going a little bit about, I know that Akash is known for getting like cost reduction. Can you talk a little bit about how it can be like 2 to 3 times cheaper than AWS, and sort of like how it really works with like containers and virtual machines and all that?
For sure, for sure. So the whole cheaper thing, it always cracks me up because when you get into the world of hosting, price becomes almost irrelevant because everyone's willing to move their prices to get you on their platform. But where I like to focus on is basically more on the workload specifically. So when you get something on Akash, you're actually getting a container, and that container is tuned to your workload. So you define what it is. If you need a tenth of a CPU, that's fine. If you need 10 CPUs, that's fine. If you need 40 CPUs, that's fine. You can specify that. In addition, you're not having to purchase resources that you're not going to be using. So, for example, on AWS, right? I go and I need 4 cores in a box. Well, maybe that means I need 16 gigs of RAM purchased, even if I'm not going to be utilizing that 16 gigs, because that's the unit of compute, the VM that they have on their library of VMs to purchase from. When it comes to Akash, I literally define all those resources. So, for example, we have a bunch of PKT miners on our network. PKT is a CPU network mined coin. All they care about is CPU cores, basically. So they're getting these boxes with, 10, 20 CPUs and like a gig of RAM and a gig of storage. So it's a completely different paradigm from the more traditional approach with just raw VM, you know, uh, basically distribution.
Your response there, let's say I want to store my data on Akash Cloud. Can you walk me through how I would go about doing that from a user's perspective?
Yeah, so you're not really going to store your data on Akash. Akash handles the stateless portion of your workload. So what you generally do, if you have, say, like a database or something, a mission critical workload, is you'd find kind of another storage mechanism. So like Skynet is out there, if you're familiar with that project. Filecoin is out there. There's actually a big list of projects that kind of all tackle that storage part. The part that we actually tackle is the compute. And there's only a handful of projects that have even tried to take on that piece. So just like AWS, you can get your storage, you can get like an S3 bucket, for example, separate from your actual server. We're just doing that server portion. So from a workload perspective, we're just taking images and deploying them on compute. It's actually Kubernetes on the background, just deploying Docker images, essentially. I mean, there's not a lot of secret sauce. It's pretty elegant. It's simple.
Could you tell us a little bit more about what Docker images are? I think the audience might not be as familiar with.
Absolutely. So basically, a Docker image is just a container that holds an application and the dependencies to run that. And that's basically run within an OS, sandboxed safely and securely. So in this particular case, a Docker image is basically a precompiled, self-contained application that's portable. Is a pretty good way to look at it.
We were talking about like how pretty much to lease a container, like the developer pretty much like deployment, right?
Yeah.
And then the provider can place a bid on it. Can you like get a little bit more into how are deals made between like the computer providers and the developers? How like the developers interact with Akash?
Yeah, absolutely. So the big thing is decentralization, right? We don't want to be the next Amazon. Amazon is the centralized enemy. We want to be enabling individuals to come and basically make these deals between themselves and define their own trust. So find providers that they want to work with, that they trust. Maybe they even have a relationship that they can build over time with those providers. We want to enable that. So what that means is we need to have a way that's basically hands-off for us. At Overclock, at Akash, we're participants of this network. We're not the owners of the network. We don't even own the governance of this network. That's a community-run thing via voting, proof of stake. Kind of the whole proof of stake model actually governs what happens with the future of this network. So when a user comes along and wants to actually create a relationship with a provider, essentially they just post to the blockchain a request for bids, and that request for bids is seen by the providers on the network based on the criteria in the request. They will submit bids, and then that user actually has the freedom to select from a list of providers that are basically relevant to what they're doing. And from there, you're able to kind of get way more complex. You can actually do like native multi-cloud tenancy, right? Where you're working with maybe 10 different providers and running images across all of them for resiliency, or kind of all of these big network buzzwords like cloud native, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud. A lot of these things are actually enabled. These core concepts are enabled just by virtue of the fact that we can interact with a whole bunch of providers within a single deployment. So it's actually really, really cool.
So does that mean that anyone can essentially become a provider?
Yeah. So from a provider standpoint, you need compute. You need to be able to run Kubernetes. The docs, the official way of doing it is deploying some K3s with like KubeSpray, and boom, you've got Kubernetes running. And then you basically just install the Akash binary, and you're now a provider. Congratulations.
So like, how do you go through like a process of like verifying that this provider is like nothing sketchy? They're actually
no bad
honest and
actors.
trustworthy?
Yeah. Absolutely. That's an excellent question. And that's as secret sauce as this network gets, but I'll try to walk you all through it here. So there's a system called audited attributes, which is basically a way to arbitrarily tag anything with a key value pair. And that sounds amazing, except anyone can tag anything. So how, if I were a bad actor, why wouldn't I just tag all of my providers that I've set up that are malicious? Maybe I'm doing something, harvesting data or something like that. I just tag them all as trusted. Well, the cool thing is it allows the community to identify their own signing authorities. So along with that key value pair, it actually takes your address, your wallet address, and pastes it on there. So you're actually writing two things. You're writing basically a fingerprint of who signed it, and you're writing the key value pair. So what this means is, from a community standpoint, for example, there's someone in our community who does basically pen testing for a living and has been very active in our community. And if they wanted to go and basically post on the forums, hey, I'm gonna start reviewing different providers, and if they pass the tests, I'm gonna sign them with this attribute. Everyone in the community could go check against the providers. Was that signed by this person I trust with the right attributes? Does it meet the criteria? Does it not? And it actually allows for this decentralized verification where, at Akash, we don't want to be the signing authority. Right now, we actually do sign some things just as kind of a getting started, bootstrapping the network. But we don't want to be that in the end. We want the community to take that on themselves and provide a trusted network within an untrustworthy ecosystem, right?
That was a lot of technical information that was nice to digest. But diving into a little on the customer side,
Yeah.
from what I could figure out, I think in a business like Akash, you don't have access to the customer's data. So you can't really build specific CRMs for them. So how do you, when you don't know who your customers really are, how do you define and alter your operations or your strategies to cater to their needs?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. And it's kind of funny because we actually don't try to cater to any specific needs other than the need for compute. So the concept is there will always be a need for CPU power and memory. And as long as what you have can fit in a container and utilize CPU and memory, we're going to be applicable. There has been some talk in the community about like marketplaces, app marketplaces, for example. But those would all be run as community tools or third-party tools. Those aren't going to be a fundamental part of the network ecosystem. They're not going to be under the same governance. That would actually be if an individual provider of a marketplace wanted to come up and turn it into a business for themselves, like, have at it. This is open source. This is decentralized to the max.
So the fact that it is open source, does Akash have any like censorship resistance? Like, is it possible for like maybe for a developer to like remove an app from the network? How does that work?
Yeah, so absolutely. That was kind of one of the big hooks, is we offer tremendous censorship resistance. And there's a few different ways we do that. First one is we make it really, really easy to release hardware. So for example, if a provider removes you from their compute for any reason, maybe they shut down their services, maybe I don't know, some governing authority that didn't like what you were saying caught up with them and made them take the site down, maybe whatever. It takes between like 30 seconds and a minute to release that on a new provider and have a container running. So it is really, really fast to do. The other way is that kind of earlier thing I mentioned where we're kind of natively multi-cloud, you can actually be running on a whole bunch of different providers. So for someone to shut you down, they would have to identify every single provider that you were running on, go to all of them individually, generally with some sort of a warrant. I mean, if it's here in the States, they'd have to go through a whole lot of court proceedings to actually get you taken down. Because it's not just Amazon that the government can knock on the door and say, hey, we don't want this website up, take it down. It's actually like now 10 different entities or 20, or if you really wanted to go nuts, you could just kind of put it on every provider you could possibly find and be super resilient. So yeah.
How easy or how tough is it to shift my workload from a particular provider to another provider if need be? And how does that work? Do you do the reverse auction process all over again, or is it some other way out?
Yeah, you just submit a new lease to the blockchain and people bid on it, and you select a new bid, and boom, you're done. That simple.
So now I think we actually want to maybe shift into maybe the more down to earth sides of Akash. So what are some of the things people are building on Akash right now that you think that you're most excited about?
Yeah. So the things that really get me going are the way we're enabling the blockchain community as a whole. So one of the things that's really cool are DEXs have started popping up on our network. So anyone who's familiar with like the Cosmos ecosystem probably has seen Osmosis Zone. They're out there basically deployed on Akash and running a DEX on Akash. I think that's awesome because not only is that enabling them to be resistant to whatever regulation comes down the line, it actually is decentralizing them further. They're not having to put a DEX up on Amazon and hope that Amazon is going to love crypto, because let's face it, Amazon does not love crypto when it comes down to it at the end of the day.
One more question. You explained how Akash is different from regular cloud computing platforms, but how is Akash different from other decentralized platforms in the space?
Yeah, so like Golem or yeah, so there aren't really currently any direct competitors. The closest is probably Golem. The big difference is Golem is more of a spot compute sort of service. It's a little more like AWS Lambda as a service, not networked. I think they actually had a proposal to try to add some networking in, but not sure where they are with that. They do have GPU power, but you basically run an analytics job on Golem, get your results, put those in something probably like Skynet for storage, and then move on with life. What we're doing here at Akash is really your whole web app. So we're going to take the front end web page. We're going to run it for as long as you have that lease. Whereas Golem, I think the max job time is about 3 hours is all you can do for an individual job.
I also read, sorry, Sebastian, go ahead.
No, you could.
Oops, sorry, I was muted. I read a decent amount about your deployment marketplace, and I read a little about your containment platform. While I understand the marketplace to a decent extent, the container model is still a point of confusion. I would love if you could explain that once.
Yeah. So the whole concept is that containers are very small, efficient units of compute. And even the big providers have been moving this direction for years and years and years. They just have this kind of legacy stuff that they have to maintain because people are still using it. But the idea that you can spin up a container where you're not paying for the operating system to be run on that container, you're not paying for tremendous overhead, you're just basically paying for the application compute you're using, is really, really critical. If you ever hear the word cloud native, that's generally what people are talking about, is this containerization movement. We're just taking that, we're embracing that, and we're bringing that into the Web 3.0 world in a way that's Web 3.0 correct, decentralized, freedom-based, all of the good things that we know and love.
So Eric, would it be a good analogy for people to think of containers similar, almost like a picnic box, but of compute? Like the picnic box, it has your CPU, or it has all the code, it has all of the code it needs, it has all of the definitions of how to actually set up the app. And then you could take that picnic box wherever you want, whether it's on Amazon servers, whether it's on an Akash provider server, whether it's on Coca-Cola servers or whoever, and you just plop it down, open up, and you can set up shop right there. Is that like a good analogy of what a container is?
Right. And the thing that actually manages it is actually a process that lives as an application on the base system. So, typically with Kubernetes, you have a Linux box. On that, you have a Kubernetes install, and inside that Kubernetes install, you run all of these containers. So you're not having a Linux box or some sort of hypervisor with a bunch of VMs that live on it. It's actually kind of simpler when you get there and get under the hood, because a lot of the complexity of like host and client OS systems, like, it's just not there. It's much simpler.
A little bit about how like Akash blockchain is like based on the Tendermint consensus. Can you explain to our audience that's not too technical, like what that is and how that impacts like the limit on the number of validators?
Yeah, so the Tendermint model, I guess I'll call it, was the idea that you could have a lot of different blockchains that are utilities. So they do something. It's not like Dogecoin or something that's just a coin for the sake of being a coin. It's a coin that enables some sort of technology, and that you can make these individual coins very easily transferable, tradable, and in some cases fully interoperable. So Tendermint basically, and the Cosmos ecosystem that sprung up as a result, was based on this concept of easy interoperability. And that's why, for example, Sentinel, DVPN, if you want a VPN and you want to be using Akash, there's really, really easy ways to get DVPN and Akash working in the same boat, because we're both on the Tendermint protocol. You don't have to go and know two different blockchains. We both have a lot of fundamental similarities, and there's a lot of interoperability between the two.
Yeah, so I guess my understanding of the Cosmos network is the philosophy behind building a blockchain and ecosystem is don't build one blockchain that can do everything okay. It's everyone builds their own blockchain that's well tuned for their specific application.
Yes.
That's, it has the economics, the everything that's specific to their application, and then you build lots of bridges between them.
That's precisely it. That's precisely it. Let everyone play to their strengths. We'll all trade freely on a free market. We'll all work with one another. We'll all be good citizens, but let everyone play to their strengths. Precisely.
An important aspect when you talk about decentralized computing and cloud computing in the first place is security. I think Fernanda touched on this in the beginning, but how does, from Akash side, how do you validate or authenticate the providers? And from a user's perspective, how does a user know who to trust? Like, can a user choose certain attributes per se for different the result, filter the providers who can bid in the first place based on our own criteria?
Yeah, so kind of like I was saying with the audited attributes earlier, essentially the community can identify trusted members to go out and actually do these auditing processes themselves. Right now, as Akash, as a company, we do actually go out and sign some things, and literally that signature is just a wallet address. It's a wallet address that's associated with us. We're very public about that address. Anyone who wants to go and try to verify some compute resources against that address can do so. But we don't sign a lot of providers currently. We're trying to encourage the community to go out there and actually take that step and basically make it further decentralized. From the user standpoint, though, actually filtering through that, right, that could get very complex, especially if we end up with thousands or tens of thousands of providers. That's why when you submit a bid request to the network, so in what's called an SDL file, when you submit that, it basically goes out and posts only respond if you fit this criteria. And so the only providers that can respond to that request are the ones that actually fit the predefined criteria that user has specified in their declarative SDL file.
Taking Ish's question in a different direction. The fact I know that like AWS does like cloud computing for like government and stuff like that. Knowing that Akash is secure and transparent, in the future, it could be possible for the government to eventually use Akash.
That'd be awesome. They're more than welcome here if they can accept the crypto, right? That's
right.
We're totally willing to let that happen, and there's not really a good. There won't be a barrier there if they felt like it. Obviously, individual providers would need to get the right compliances and things, but that could be documented in audited attributes that could be queried. The government could even go and put audited attributes on people they trust that would be queryable by everyone on the blockchain. So it'd actually be a very good relationship if they chose to go that way.
Right.
Do you think it could be said that Akash can maybe force the cloud compute platforms to compete a little bit? Do you think, like, how much of effect do you think that has on the price? Because a lot of like what AWS and Google, like a lot of the big reasons their prices can stay so high is because they lock people in. Right. Whereas Akash seems like a way to like force that to not be the case. So how much do you see that being a force that can make the prices go much lower in the future?
I think that's a piece of it. Yeah. I mean, Akash literally is taking the approach of if Amazon wanted to come and be a provider on us, we wouldn't say no. They'd just be marked as the Amazon provider, right? They wouldn't get any bids if they weren't competitive in cost, because people can actually specify, like, this is the maximum amount I'm willing to pay. And they won't get any bids back that don't meet those criteria. So it would kind of force that hand. I think the real hook for a lot of those providers is actually kind of some of the, I don't really want to call them second tier providers, but not the big three, right? You got Amazon, Azure, and Google. Those are the monopoly, let's call it for now. They're the people who control the market. Then you've got people like Rackspace, DigitalOcean, much smaller, but generally very, very technically sound ecosystems. I think there's real opportunity for them to come in, and many of them are not necessarily price competitive day one, but would have the ability to become so very, very easily. I think that would just be amazing. There's also providers like Equinox, which are actually fairly mega provider, but no one outside of the like enterprise space is probably very familiar with them. But they're actually already doing some providing on the Akash network. If IBM or Oracle Cloud wanted to come this direction, they'd be more than welcome as well. But again, the prices they would charge would have to be competitive with the smaller providers, the one-offs, because bids only get fulfilled if they meet the criteria that the users are looking for.
I'm not sure if this is the right question to ask in this place, but I'm pretty interested in understanding where Akash makes money in this whole process, and what's the business model that Akash is following.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and that's kind of a funny question too, because we are in the world of crypto, right? There's this perception that like money flows from the sky for crypto. That's kind of true, but not exactly. So right now, we don't actually make almost anything on the network. The network is actually a contribution. We're participants. We're just citizens. We're part of the network. And even if we wanted to like try and take that back at this point, we couldn't do it because of the governance model. We'd get shut down. So from a revenue standpoint, we actually don't really make revenue on the network currently. There's a proposal that's been floating around, or I should say the talk of a proposal that's been floating around the community for a while, of basically a certain amount of the compute pay should basically go to validators. So whatever percentage that is, whether it's 1, 2, 10, 20, whatever that percentage ends up being, every dollar that's paid for compute could go to a validator. That'd be a great way for someone like us to actually earn some money back. Or we could host not proprietary, that's the wrong word. We could host our own marketplace with apps on it, and maybe those are specially curated images we could charge for. There are ways we could make money, but we're not worried about that right now. We're trying to create something that hopefully basically enables our kids to have the ability to go be entrepreneurial without having to bow to the corporate overlords.
Yeah, and I think one question, maybe follow-up question I have to that is, could you say that like AKT is probably like the main way you guys do maybe make money in some sense? It's more like you're accruing value than it is anything, right? Because like you introduce AKT, you guys probably hold a lot of it, and so if there's a lot of demand on the network, it's well used.
Right.
AKT goes up, you guys win. It's not like you have revenue in the traditional sense, but
exactly.
You guys still. You're better off for it.
Yeah, that you're exactly right. That's 100%. If Akash wins, we will do well. We're very public about that. We don't charge people money though. That's we don't need to, because it really is. It's kind of like a super stock in one sense. We make money when stock goes up, and stock goes up when we do our jobs well and when we contribute to the thing the stock is based off of.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like a common business model in the space.
Yeah, it definitely is.
I have another question that came to mind. So talking on the side of security again, how do you guys like avoid issues like DOS attacks or any sort of like network abuse?
Yeah, network abuse of the blockchain or the providers?
The blockchain.
Blockchain. Yeah, so that is actually something I'm not super familiar with. I got hired at Akash very short while ago, about 2 months now. But I am learning all of those things. So I wish I could give you a better answer than that, but I'm going to have to kind of cop out on that one.
The providers.
Providers, yeah. So providers are basically responsible to secure themselves. If they want specific compliances, if they want specific security, hopefully that would be value adds that they could then tag themselves with in the attributes. But right now, you could be someone in their garage with a Raspberry Pi running a Kubernetes cluster if you really, really wanted to, right? And that's totally fine. That's totally fine. There are going to be workloads that are valid for what you're providing. Just probably shouldn't be a mission critical, highly sensitive workload.
Right, makes sense.
Can look into some of the questions that the audience has for you.
Absolutely.
I'll read them out. One of them is, how is Akash different from the interplanetary file system?
Yeah, so big difference is we're not a file system at all. All we do is the compute. So the hosting of files is not. We don't even have persistent storage right now. There's currently an effort to get some minimal persistent storage on our network, but right now we're completely stateless. So I'd say that's the biggest difference. We just don't do it.
There's also a question that says, are you looking into storing data on this file system?
Yeah, so I mean, again, we are looking at having some form of persistent storage, but it's not going to be the giant storage solutions that you get from like a major cloud provider. It's just not our intention to do. And part of being a piece of the Cosmos ecosystem means there's actually other providers within Cosmos who are basically filling that gap and doing what they need to do to provide that service. So we want to be good citizens of the Cosmos ecosystem as much as we want to be providers of technology. So interoperability with them is key and is kind of a core value of ours.
It seems like another popular question is, what is AWS doing to mitigate the risk of being completely wiped out by Akash?
I would love to know the answer to that question. I have a dream where someday they come to us and ask to be a provider. I think that would be the best thing ever, because when it really comes down to it, in the future of the web, we are, I think, the best shot I have ever seen to win the David and Goliath fight between everyone else and the big cloud providers.
Yeah, another interesting question. I think it's actually a pretty good question. Is, can the community take things down through government decision? So if someone is maybe running a site that's doing something illegal, maybe like human trafficking or something like that, can the community like force that thing to not be hosted?
So that's actually kind of a complex question. The short answer is no. And that's actually a good thing, because you can't have censorship resistance if you have a way to easily censor. Now, from the standpoint of the providers, though, they could absolutely shut that workload down. And any good provider, any good participant of that network would do so. That's actually something that if audits go through and happen on those providers, something that's would need to be taken into account is, are they basically keeping clean workloads? If they're being used as a platform like DDoS attacks, or human trafficking or child porn, or any of the things that are just not good about the internet, right? That's up to the provider. And really that reflects the legal structure as well, because just like in an Airbnb type situation, if that space is being used for horrible things, it's not on Airbnb. It's actually on the homeowner to kick them out.
Another question in the chat, and I have a follow-up question to that, is that someone's asking, what are the requirements to run an Akash validator? And if I can add to that question, I remember reading in your white paper that you have limited the number of validators to start with. I think it's at 64.
80 currently, actually. It was just updated via proposal. Yeah.
I see. Nice. So how does that work? Why is it limited? What are the requirements, of course, to answer the audience's question? If you could dive into that.
Yeah, for sure. I'll start with the requirements. So the requirements are actually pretty simple. It's not a big box at all. I think it's, I'm going to try to do this from memory. I might get it wrong, check the docs. But I believe it's 16 gigs of RAM and 4 or 8 cores. I don't quite recall which. Not a crazy box. The big thing is you're basically just standing up a blockchain node and then getting people to delegate to you. Staking, right, or proof of stake. So people stake with you, delegate their tokens, and if you're in that top 80 most staked to nodes, then you become a validator. You basically just kind of automatically graduate into validation status. That's really all it takes. What was the other part of the question? If you wouldn't mind repeating it.
Just why is there a cap on the number of validators, and how do you determine expanding them or increasing them?
Yeah, so I'll take that in reverse. So the way they're expanded is actually by vote. So the community actually votes on a proposal to expand the validator set, just like they would on, say, like a schema change in the blockchain. It requires a full vote, which requires a certain number of or a certain amount of people participate, and a certain majority for that to actually pass. So that's the first part. The second part, why did we cap it? I don't know what the actual rationale was, but one of the things with these networks is you don't want, a million validators. You do want to have a relatively small set, because especially on AKT, when a block on the AKT chain actually is created, that's basically signed by everyone. So the more you have, the more complexity you're adding, and reducing complexity is a good way to keep your speed steady.
I have also maybe a somewhat tangential question. Does anybody run an Akash validator on Akash?
You know what? That's actually really fun. Very meta, right? I don't actually know. I know they run a lot of other validators. So like we have a couple of Helium validators. I think we have a couple of Avalanche validators. There's a lot of other chains that like run their validators on Akash, but I'm not sure if anyone's running Akash on Akash. You totally could. There's like no reason you could. It'd be kind of funny to say the least.
Yeah, it's a fun club project if any college clubs are looking for something to try.
Absolutely. Give it a go.
Yeah, good idea right there. Yeah. I guess another question overall, since we learned a lot about Akash tonight, what would you say are the major milestone that Akash Network has like achieved so far, and like what's in store for the future?
Yeah, I think if we've done nothing else, we've provided a safe, decentralized place for other cryptos to grow and expand. I've talked a little bit about being a good citizen of the crypto community here. That is really a core fundamental value. If we can enable the Web3 future and enable cryptocurrency, enable crypto projects, blockchain projects, which we've very much started to do, I would be very happy, even if we didn't get any other market share, which I think we will. I mean, we're definitely positioned to, but even if we could just do that and do that well, I'd be happy at the end of the day. That's a very good thing to do. And we've done so far, and I hope we continue.
So very strong vision, and I hope we get there. But before sorry, I just had one more question. I remembered about the portion about token economics in your paper, and it talked about how you anticipate that in the early days of the network, there would be a high chance that the providers would not be able to earn a sufficient or a meaningful income because of poor demand from tenants who are the consumers of the computing. How did you face that problem, I guess, is my first question. And if you did, then how are you overcoming it?
Yeah, so it's actually funny you bring that up. So recently there was a whole other blockchain community that found us. So the PKT miners that I brought up earlier, they found us and just started kind of blowing out our demand. We actually, I think we went through our entire capacity in like a day and a half. So we've actually been very, very fortunate. We're bootstrapping boxes as quickly as we can, basically, to keep up with them for 2 weeks straight. It's stabilized now, but at that point in time, that was a validation that what we were doing was the right thing. That investors haven't had a problem seeing the vision. There hasn't been a problem with getting infrastructure. There hasn't been a problem with getting consumers. So we've been very, very fortunate.
Awesome. Yeah, well, this has been a great talk. Akash is probably an awesome company. Is Akash currently hiring?
Yeah, we actually have a lot of positions open. Check out our website; they're all posted there. But yeah, we are growing at a pretty staggering rate.
Yeah, great company to work for if you're looking for somewhere to land in the space. And you have the person right here to talk to. And thank you guys all for coming. Now we're about to move into the networking portion, where if you want to talk to Eric, you can absolutely do that. So I will see you guys there, and otherwise I'll see you guys all around Bath.
Thank you, guys.